Her parents used her as a servant until she met a giant vampire king who treated her like a queen. In the kingdom of Valadrath, there was a large stone manor that stood on a hill. The people who passed it believed a noble family lived there in comfort and pride. They were wrong. Inside that manor lived a girl who had never truly been treated as a daughter. Her name was Elara. Once, when she was very small, she had silk dresses and warm hands to hold her. She remembered laughter in bright halls. She remembered her mother brushing her hair gently. But those memories felt like stories from another life. When her parents lost favor in the royal court, everything changed. Their lands were reduced. Their wealth grew thin, and their smiles toward their only daughter disappeared like sunlight behind clouds. They began to look at her differently. Not as a child, not as someone to protect, but as something to use. Elara was given simple dresses made of rough cloth. Her long golden hair was tied back tightly so it would not fall in her way while she worked. She rose before sunrise and cleaned the manor halls that once echoed with music. She scrubbed floors, she washed dishes, she carried water until her arms trembled. And if she ever slowed, her mother would remind her, "You should be grateful we allow you to stay here." Her father rarely looked at her at all. When guests visited, Elara was ordered to keep out of sight. She stood behind doors and listened to conversations about politics and power. She heard her father complain about how unfair life had been to him. He never once spoke of her dreams, because no one ever asked her what she wanted. Still, something inside Elara refused to disappear. At night, when the house was quiet, she would sit near the small window in the attic where she slept. She would look at the silver moon above the hills and imagine another world, a world where she walked freely, a world where someone spoke her name with kindness. She often whispered to herself, "I am more than this." But whispers are fragile things, and reality was heavy. Beyond the borders of Valadrath stretched a dark forest known as the Valewood. No one traveled there after sunset. Stories said shadows moved on their own. Stories said the air felt colder the deeper you walked. And beyond that forest lay the Night Dominion, a kingdom ruled not by the sun, but by eternal twilight. Its ruler was known across lands as Caliph, the Vampire King. People said he was enormous in size, taller than any man. They said his eyes shone like red stars in darkness. They said he had ruled for centuries and never aged. They said he was dangerous. No one knew the truth. What they did know was this. Every few decades, the kingdoms surrounding the Night Dominion offered tribute to keep peace. Jewels, rare treasures. This year, however, was different. The human king of Valadrath had grown fearful. Crops had failed. Trade had slowed. Rumors spread that the vampire king might claim more than gold next time. So the court whispered of a new kind of tribute, something living, something valuable. When the message reached Elara's father, his eyes changed. For years he had believed she was a burden. Now he saw opportunity. That night, Elara was called into the main hall. Candles burned low. Her parents stood together, dressed in their finest clothing. For a moment, her heart lifted. They looked at her fully for the first time in months. "Come closer," her mother said gently. Elara stepped forward. Her father studied her face. "You are fortunate," he said. She did not understand. Her mother placed a white silk gown in her hands. "Tomorrow you will leave this manor. You have been chosen for an honorable duty." "What duty?" Her father did not hesitate. "You will be sent to the Night Dominion." Silence filled the hall. Elara felt the world shift under her feet. "I do not understand," she whispered. Her mother smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "The Vampire King has agreed to accept a living tribute instead of increasing demands upon our lands. And you," her father finished, "will go in service of peace. But Elara heard the truth beneath them. They were sending her away, not as a daughter, as an offering. Fear rose inside her like cold water.
You cannot mean this.
You owe this family. I have done everything you asked, she said quietly. And now you will do this, her mother replied. Elara searched their faces for even a small sign of regret. There was none. That night, she did not cry. Instead, she sat by the attic window and stared at the moon longer than ever before. If she was to leave, she would leave with dignity. She would not beg. She would not break. Deep inside, a strange feeling stirred. Not only fear, but something else, a quiet sense that her life was about to change. The journey to the Night Dominion took 3 days. She traveled in a black carriage surrounded by royal guards. No one spoke to her except to offer food or water. When they reached the edge of the Valewood, the air grew still. Tall trees blocked the sun. Silver mist curled around the wheels of the carriage. Elara stepped out when ordered. Before her stood towering obsidian gates carved with ancient symbols. The guards did not cross them. "This is where we leave you," one of them said softly. He looked almost sorry. The gates began to open without being touched. A deep sound echoed as stone moved against stone. Beyond the gates stretched a vast courtyard, lit by floating lanterns that glowed like captured stars. The sky above was not fully dark, not fully light. It shimmered in permanent twilight. Figures stood at a distance, watching her arrival. They were pale, graceful, and silent, and at the center of them all stood a single towering form.
He was larger than any man she had ever seen.
Broad shoulders, dark armor that seemed made from night itself. A long black cloak moved softly behind him, though there was no wind. His hair was dark as shadow. His eyes glowed faintly red, not bright or wild, but steady and aware. This was Caliph, the Vampire King. Elara's breath caught in her throat. He stepped forward slowly. Each movement was calm and controlled. She expected him to look at her like prey. She expected hunger. Instead, his gaze held something she could not name. Recognition. As if he had been waiting. The guards behind her quickly bowed and retreated, leaving her alone before the king. Silence stretched between them. Elara forced herself to stand straight. She would not kneel unless commanded. Caliph stopped a few steps away. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, not at her gown, not at her fear, at her. His voice was deep but not harsh. It carried strength, yet also restraint. She blinked. "Yes, Your Majesty." He tilted his head slightly. "Do you come here by choice?" The question surprised her. The question...
"No," she answered honestly. A quiet murmur moved through the watching court.
Caliph's eyes darkened, not with anger toward her, but something else. Understanding.
"You were given,"
he said softly. Something changed in his expression then. Not pity, not cruelty. Resolve. Without warning, the towering king lowered himself onto one knee before her. Gasps rose from the court like wind through leaves. Elara froze. A king did not kneel to an offering. Yet there he was, immense, powerful, feared, lowering himself so their eyes were level. "You were sent here without choice," he said. "But while you stand in my kingdom, you will not be without voice." Her heart pounded. No one had ever spoken to her like that. "I do not understand," she whispered. "You are not a tribute," Caliph continued. "You are under my protection."
Protection. The word felt unreal. A protection. The word felt unreal.
He studied her face carefully.
"Has anyone asked you what you wish?"
Tears threatened her eyes, but she held them back. "No." The Vampire King rose slowly to his full height. "Then I will." Elara felt the weight of every gaze upon her. For the first time in her life, someone powerful was waiting for her answer. "What do you wish, Elara of Valadrath?" The question echoed through her heart. She had never been given space to think of her own desire. But standing before this strange and ancient king, she felt something awaken inside her. Courage. "I wish," she said carefully, "to be treated as a person, not a burden, not a gift, not a tool." The twilight air seemed to shimmer. Haleth's lips curved very slightly. Not a smile, but something close. "Then that is how you will be treated." He turned toward his court. "Prepare the eastern chambers." A stunned whisper spread among them. Those chambers were reserved for royalty. Elara stared at him.
"Why?"
she asked softly. He looked back at her, and for the first time, warmth flickered in his glowing eyes. "Because," he said, "you are not beneath this kingdom." The lanterns above glowed brighter, and in that moment something shifted, not only in the Night Dominion, but inside Elara herself. For the first time, she did not feel small. She did not feel invisible. She felt seen. But as the court slowly bowed to her, not in mockery, but in respect, Elara sensed that her arrival was more than coincidence, and far above them, hidden within the twilight sky, ancient magic stirred. Because the Vampire King had not knelt in centuries, and the world was beginning to notice. Elara woke in a room she had never imagined. The eastern chambers Caliph had spoken of were grand, yet not overdone. The walls were lined with dark velvet, and tall windows framed the twilight sky. Lanterns floated without chains, casting soft light like captured fireflies.
For the first time in her life, Elara felt she belonged somewhere entirely different from fear and neglect.
Her hands, which had always trembled when carrying a tray or sweeping a floor, rested easily on her lap. Her heart, usually tight with anxiety, beat with cautious hope. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Enter," she called. Ah. The door opened slowly. A tall, pale figure in court attire bowed slightly. "Your Majesty requests your presence," the servant said. Lara blinked. I am not a queen, I am." "You are under his protection," the servant interrupted gently. "He wishes to see you." Her stomach fluttered like a bird trapped in her chest. She had no idea what Caliph wanted. She had seen him in the courtyard kneel to her, an act no mortal expected from an immortal king. Yet now, walking toward him in the throne hall, her mind spun with unease and curiosity. The hall was immense. Shadows stretched like long fingers across the floor, but the light of lanterns softened their edges. The throne itself was carved from black stone and polished obsidian, towering over the room. Yet it did not feel oppressive. Caliph sat upon it, not leaning back like a distant ruler, but straight and alert. When he noticed her, he stood. His height alone would have made any mortal feel small, but Elara no longer felt small. Somehow, in his presence, she felt noticed, truly noticed. "You came quickly," he said, his deep voice resonating through the hall. "Good. I wish to speak before your first formal meeting with my court." Elara nodded, uncertain how to respond. Her lips parted, but no words came. She felt like she was walking a bridge over a vast chasm, the other side unknown. Caliph gestured toward a smaller chair near the throne. "Sit." You will not stand to please anyone here unless you choose to. The words struck her. In Valadrath, standing meant respect. Kneeling meant obedience. Here she could sit. Just sit. And yet, sitting was more than comfort. It was permission to exist as herself. Ilara lowered herself slowly, trying not to betray the thrill she felt. "Thank you," she murmured. He nodded. His gaze softened for a moment, a rare break in the eternal mask of the Vampire King. "Tell me, Ilara," he asked, "what do you know of this court?" I know only what I have heard," she admitted. "That you are feared, and your power is immense." Kyleth did not smile, but he did not frown. He simply observed her carefully. Power is a tool, not a gift. Fear is a cage. Some choose to remain imprisoned by it. Others break free. Ilara shivered slightly, realizing he spoke not of himself, but perhaps of everyone in the court.
I would not wish to frighten anyone," she said quietly.
"No one here wishes to frighten you," he said. "You may fear me if you must, but no one may harm you." The reassurance felt strange in her ears. For years she had believed fear and pain were constants in life. To hear a king promise protection, not possession, made her heart expand in ways she could not yet understand. The first days in the Night Dominion passed in careful exploration. Kyleth allowed her to walk the halls of the castle, introducing her to servants, scholars, and sentinels. All bowed to her, not out of fear, but in recognition of the king's choice. The court watched her closely. Whispers floated on the edges of conversation. Some nobles murmured disapproval, some were curious, and some were unsettled. Ilara quickly realized that her arrival disrupted the balance of the Night Dominion. She was immortal, yet the king treated her as his equal. That simple fact sent ripples through centuries-old power structures. She also noticed how Kyleth watched her, not as a ruler watches a subject, but as one person watches another. He noticed her hands trembling when she carried books. He noticed the way she lingered near the window at twilight. He noticed when she hesitated before speaking to someone of the court. And, as days passed, she noticed how she began to anticipate his attention, not with fear but with longing. His presence made her feel stronger, bolder, and more alive. One evening, as the two of them walked through the castle gardens, a soft silver mist curling around their feet, she dared to speak what she had never spoken aloud. "Why do you treat me this way?" she asked. "I am only a girl sent as a tribute. Why do you not see me as less than?" Kyla stopped and turned to her. His red eyes reflected the pale moonlight, glowing softly but intensely. "Because you are not less," he said. "You are not defined by what others claim you to be. You have a spark, Ilara, a fire that has survived neglect and cruelty." "That is rare." Ilara looked down at her hands. She had never thought of herself as special. I do not feel special," she admitted. "Special does not always feel comfortable," he replied. "It can feel heavy, unfamiliar, even frightening. But it is there, and it cannot be denied." Something in her chest lifted at his words. For the first time in her life, someone acknowledged not just her existence, but her strength. Yet life in the Night Dominion was not free from tension. Kyleth's court had its own politics, its own resentments, and centuries of rules. The counselors, immortal and wise, did not immediately accept a mortal standing beside their king. Some whispered that she would bring ruin.
Others, who had grown lonely over long centuries, watched with cautious hope. One evening, a counselor named Meles approached Ilara during dinner.
His eyes were sharp, calculating. "You are brave to sit beside the king," he said.
"But bravery is no shield. Do not forget who you are."
"I will not forget," she said. "But I am also more than I once was.
I will not kneel unless I choose to. Meles arched an eyebrow. Choice? Yes. A rare thing here. Let us hope it serves you well. But inside, a spark of defiance grew. She was learning, slowly, how to exist in a world built for shadows and immortals without losing herself. Caliph began to spend more time with her privately, teaching her about the Night Dominion, its history, and the delicate balance of its power. He spoke not only of law and magic, but also of responsibility and justice. Elara listened, absorbing everything. His lessons were strict, yet patient.
He never raised his voice at her. He corrected gently, guided firmly.
In his presence, she began to understand what it meant to hold power without cruelty. One night, as they walked in the library, a vast hall filled with ancient tomes and floating candlelight, Caliph stopped and looked at her intently. You have learned quickly, he said, and yet you carry fear still. Not of me, but of yourself. That fear is your greatest obstacle. Elara swallowed hard. I have never known a life without fear, she said softly. Even here, I feel it sometimes. He stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the floor like a protective shield. Fear is natural, but you can choose what you let it control. You have already done more than most mortals in this kingdom ever could. Her pulse quickened. She wanted to ask him how he had known all along, how he could see her, understand her in ways no one ever had. But words failed her. Instead, she simply nodded. Caliph studied her for a long moment. Then, as if making a decision, he turned and led her to a window overlooking the vast valley outside the Night Dominion. The sky shimmered in twilight, silver mist curling over black forests, the moon hanging low and luminous. Look at it, he said. Every corner of this kingdom is shaped by choice and consequence. You can walk through it without fear, and one day you may lead, not as tribute, but as someone who belongs. Elara stared out, the wind stirring her hair. For the first time, she imagined herself not as a servant, not as a girl sent unwillingly, but as someone with purpose, someone who could shape her own story. And in that moment, the truth began to settle in her heart. Her life had changed forever. Yet the court whispered, the council watched. The shadows of the Night Dominion were patient, and some still doubted her. Danger could arrive not from cruelty, but from envy, ambition, or old resentment. Elara did not yet know what the future would bring. She only knew that beside her, Caliph, the great vampire king, treated her not as a servant, not as a gift, but as someone worthy, someone seen, and that, she realized, was more terrifying and thrilling than any shadow. The next morning she awoke to a sound she had never heard before in the Night Dominion. Laughter, light, soft, warm. She followed it to find Caliph standing by the training grounds, watching a group of young sentinels practice their discipline. He turned as she approached. Good morning, Elara, he said. Would you like to join? She blinked. Join? I have never trained in anything like this. Then you shall learn, he said simply. His tone held no judgment, only invitation. Fear is not the only way to survive. Strength and skill are necessary too. And I will teach you. Her chest tightened. She had never been trained, never been taught, never been seen as capable. And yet, with Caliph, she felt a strange courage rising. She nodded. Yes, I want to learn. And as the sun, silver and pale, spread across the courtyard, Elara took her first steps, not as a servant, but as someone standing beside a king, ready to face the shadows of the Night Dominion. The Night Dominion had always been a kingdom of shadows. Silence ruled most halls, broken only by the soft echo of footsteps or the distant flutter of wings. The court moved like stars around Caliph, the vampire king, each immortal performing duties shaped by centuries of habit and power. Yet, Ilara's presence had begun to stir something unfamiliar, not fear, not envy alone. Something more subtle, yet stronger, a challenge to the order that had persisted for centuries. It began on the morning of the ritual practice. Kyleth had invited her to learn the old ways of the Night Dominion, lessons in both strategy and discipline. She followed him to the training halls where weapons hung like dark art and the air hummed with unseen energy. "You will need more than courage to survive here," Caliph said as they entered. "Strength alone is not enough. You must learn balance, control, and observation. Do you understand?"
Elora nodded, gripping a wooden practice staff for the first time.
She had never trained before, yet something in Caliph's calm, unwavering gaze gave her confidence. "Do not rush," he warned. "Control is better than force. Fear weakens. Awareness strengthens." For hours, she practiced. Her movements were awkward at first. The staff felt heavy in her hands, her arms ached, and every motion seemed clumsy. But Caliph watched her patiently, correcting posture, showing her how to move with flow instead of fighting against the weight. "You have a natural rhythm," he noted finally, his deep voice echoing in the hall. "Few mortals can keep pace with this training. You will learn quickly." For once, she was being judged by skill, not by her family's perception or the fear others felt of her presence. She looked at Caliph, who had returned to his own practice, and realized that she was not just learning to defend herself. She was learning to stand as an equal in this shadowed kingdom. But not everyone welcomed her progress. The counselor Malis, pale and tall with eyes like ice, had watched her from the shadows since her arrival. He had tolerated her presence only because Caliph allowed it. "But now," he whispered in corners, his voice sharp, cold, full of warning. "She is mortal," he said to another courtier one evening, "and yet she walks among us as if she belongs. The king's judgment is clouded. This cannot end well." Elara overheard fragments of his conversation, though she chose to remain silent. She could feel his eyes on her at every council meeting, every gathering, and a shiver of tension ran through her. She understood that survival in the Night Dominion was more than learning to fight. It was navigating centuries of distrust, fear, and old grudges. Days passed, blending into nights that never truly ended. The sky above the Night Dominion remained a constant twilight, stars drifting lazily across the horizon. Elara found herself drawn to the gardens each evening, where Caliph sometimes met her to discuss history, law, or simply the strange beauty of the kingdom. One evening, as they walked along a path lined with glowing lanterns, she spoke what she had not dared to before. "Caliph, why do you trust me?" she asked softly. "Why do you treat me as someone worthy, when I am just a mortal, sent here unwillingly?"
He stopped walking and looked at her, his red eyes catching the silver glow of the lanterns.
For a moment he said nothing, and Elara feared she had offended him. Then he spoke, quietly but firmly. "Because you do not see fear as your only option," he said. "You do not bow because it is expected, and you do not speak only to please. You carry yourself with honesty. That is a strength that many of my immortals have forgotten." Elara felt warmth bloom in her chest. No one had ever praised her like that. No one had ever seen her like that.
"And because," he added, "I have not had the privilege of seeing someone like you in centuries."
Someone who can remind me of what it means to be human. Her stomach tightened. She looked away, focusing on the lanterns and the mist curling around their feet. She had begun to care for him, though the depth of those feelings confused her. He was not just a king. He was powerful beyond imagination, and yet he treated her as an equal. That equality made her heart both sore and ache. Meanwhile, unrest grew within the court. Not everyone welcomed a mortal learning the ways of immortals. Murmurs of rebellion began in quiet halls, whispers of a shadow who would act to disrupt the bond forming between Caliph and Elara. One night, as she returned from the gardens, Elara sensed movement in the darkened corridors. Shadows flickered across walls, silent as the mist. Before she could react, a figure emerged. A tall, hooded stranger with eyes that gleamed like sharp silver. "You are the one the king favors," the figure said, voice low, almost a hiss. "Do you know what that means?" Alara's hands shook slightly, but she squared her shoulders.
Whoa.
"It means nothing," she said. "I am under the king's protection." The stranger's lips curved, but not in kindness. "Protection is temporary," he said, "and yet you are clever for a mortal." Perhaps that is why he fears you. She realized that the danger she had been warned of was not abstract. It was real, but she refused to flee. Before the figure could respond, Caliph appeared, stepping from the shadows like a storm made human. He was taller than the hooded intruder, and the air around him seemed to hum with energy. "You will leave," Caliph commanded. His voice was soft yet unyielding. "Now." The intruder hesitated, then vanished into the darkness, leaving only a faint whisper of warning behind. Caliph turned to Elara, his expression unreadable. "This court is older than you can imagine," he said, "and some have long memories. You must be prepared for challenges, not only from outside, but from within these walls." I understand. "You will not face them alone," he said. "I will not allow harm to come to you. But you must also learn to stand, to trust your own strength." The following days were filled with preparation. Caliph trained her in the ways of the Night Dominion, not just physical skill, but observation, strategy, and subtle understanding of the court. One afternoon, as they practiced in the library, a large hall filled with floating books and candlelight, Caliph spoke of his past. "Long ago," he began, "I trusted someone with my heart. A queen who promised loyalty and love. I believed in her, but she betrayed me. The gods themselves punished me, and my heart was changed. That pain shaped the man you see before you."
Elara listened silently, her own heart aching for the centuries of grief he carried. "Do you still feel that pain?" she asked softly.
Kayla's eyes, glowing faint red, softened. "Yes. But pain is a teacher. It warns me. It reminds me that trust is rare, and love is worth guarding. That is why I am careful." Elara felt a strange warmth rise inside her. She realized he had been careful with everyone for centuries, but with her, he was allowing himself to feel again.
"You trust me?" she said, almost as a question. He did not answer immediately.
Instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder, not heavy, not possessive, but grounding. "I do," he said finally. "But trust is not blind. You must also learn to see clearly. And you must choose to stand beside me, not because you fear, but because you will it." One evening, as the silver light of the moon shimmered over the Night Dominion, Caliph took Elara to the highest tower. From there, she could see the entire kingdom stretching into shadow and mist. The forests, the mountains, the floating lanterns, all seemed alive with quiet magic.
"Everything you see," he said, "is built on balance, light and dark.
Fear and trust, strength and humility. You will need to understand this if you are to survive here." Elara looked at him, feeling a mixture of awe and longing.
"I want to learn," she said. "I want to understand."
"Then you shall, and you will grow. But remember, there will be challenges that even I cannot fully prepare you for." A sudden wind swept through the tower, and the floating lanterns flickered as if in warning. Elara's heart thudded. She sensed danger. Not immediate, but looming. Something stirred in the shadows of the court. An ancient magic that had slumbered for centuries began to shift. Caliph placed a hand over hers. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together. You are no longer alone." Ilara felt a shiver of both fear and hope. She realized that she had begun to care for him, not just as a king, not just as a protector, but as someone who had awakened something in her heart she had never known. And yet, as they stood together, the wind whispered through the tower like a secret. Shadows moved, waiting, watching, and the court's murmurs of rebellion were only the beginning. For in the Night Dominion, peace was fragile, trust was rare, and the bonds of the heart could be tested by forces older than time itself. The Night Dominion had never been quiet, even under Caliph's steady rule. Whispers of the past lingered like mist in the castle halls. Shadows moved as if they had their own life, and the court, ancient and sharp, had eyes everywhere. Ilara had grown accustomed to these halls. She moved with confidence now, no longer the fearful girl sent as a tribute. The lessons Caliph had taught her, of observation, patience, and self-respect, had transformed her. She carried herself like someone who belonged, and Caliph noticed every subtle change, every small victory. Yet the unrest that had begun in whispers now stirred louder. A secret council of discontented immortals had formed, plotting to test the bond between Caliph and the mortal girl who had shaken centuries of tradition. Their leader was Malus, the counselor who had never accepted her presence.
Ilara felt the tension growing before anyone spoke.
The castle air had a different weight, heavier, as if the shadows themselves were holding their breath. That evening, Caliph summoned her to the highest tower. The moonlight poured in, silver and calm, but the wind carried a sense of urgency.
Ilara,
he said, his deep voice steady. You have learned much.
You have strength and wisdom that go beyond your years, but there are forces here.
Forces that will not accept change easily. You must be prepared. I am, she replied, though her heart thudded. I have you beside me, Caliph. I will not be afraid. He studied her, eyes glowing faintly red in the moonlight. It is not courage alone that will protect you. It is understanding. The Night Dominion has rules older than kings, older than kingdoms.
And you, mortal though you are, must navigate them carefully.
She trusted him, yet she understood the weight of his warning. This world was unlike any she had known in Valadrath. Here, every choice could ripple through centuries of history. The ancient chamber was carved from black stone, lit by floating lanterns that moved with subtle intelligence. Ilara entered, head held high, wearing a gown of silver and midnight blue. The colors Caliph had chosen for her, not as adornment, but as a symbol of respect and authority. Whispers ran through the council as she took her place beside Caliph. Malus's eyes narrowed, his lips a thin line of disapproval.
The mortal sits beside the king, he murmured, voice sharp as glass.
Caliph did not respond immediately. Instead, he let Ilara speak.
You may doubt me,
she began, her voice steady. You may think that I do not belong here, but I have learned.
I have studied, and I have stood with the king in every trial these past weeks.
The council remained silent. She continued, Power is not measured by age or by immortality alone. It is measured by courage, by choice, and by the heart that guides it.
I am here not to replace you or to rule, but to learn.
And I ask only to be treated as a person, capable of thought, choice, and respect. A few counselors stirred uneasily. Melis's eyes burned with quiet fury, but Caliph's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a subtle reminder that she was under his protection. When she finished, Caliph spoke. His voice echoed through the hall like a command no one could ignore. Her words are true, he said. Ilara has proven herself capable and wise. She stands beside me not as a servant, not as a gift, but as an equal in counsel and respect. Those who cannot accept this will be judged accordingly." The court murmured again, but this time there was hesitation. Even Melis faltered under Calith's authority. Yet the shadow of threat remained. That night, as Ilara walked through the castle halls, she felt movement behind her. The shadows of the Night Dominion had grown restless. "You cannot do this alone," a voice whispered, echoing through the stone corridors. Ilara turned. A figure stepped from the darkness, a silent, hooded messenger who had appeared before, carrying warnings.
"You are the key," the stranger said. "The king's heart is vulnerable because of you. If you fail, the kingdom will suffer."
She realized the truth in the words. She was more than a visitor in the Night Dominion. Her choices, her courage, her very presence had become entwined with the fate of the kingdom and the king she had come to care for. Before she could respond, Calith appeared from the shadows, towering and commanding. "You will not frighten her," he said, voice low but unyielding. "Leave now." Calith turned to Ilara. "This is only the beginning," he said. "There are forces here older than either of us. They will test you." "They will test us, but together we can endure." Ilara nodded, gripping his hand lightly. She realized then that she no longer wanted to be protected. She wanted to stand beside him, not out of fear, but by choice. The days that followed were filled with preparation. Calith taught her the ancient magic of the Night Dominion, lessons that required patience, focus, and trust in oneself. Ilara absorbed everything with determination. One evening, as they practiced in the courtyard under the moonlight, Calith spoke of his past. "I was betrayed once," he said softly, "by a queen I loved. Her betrayal was not just of trust, but of hope. The gods punished me for my grief, turning my heart into something hard, unyielding. I have ruled this kingdom for centuries, never trusting, never opening myself, until now." "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, taking her hand, "I see that trust can be earned again, that love can be chosen. But it is fragile. That is why you must be strong, Ilara. For both of us." She understood then that their bond was not just affection, it was responsibility, respect, choice. Weeks passed, and the tension in the court reached its peak. The counselor Melis moved openly now, spreading doubts and resentment among those who feared change. One night, as the castle slept under a silver moon, Melis enacted a plan. He summoned a shadow spirit, a being of ancient magic, to threaten Ilara. The spirit approached silently, intent on frightening her into submission. Ilara felt the cold brush of its presence before she saw it. Her instincts, sharpened by Calith's training, guided her. She lifted her staff and focused, drawing on the lessons she had learned in observation and control. The spirit hissed, but she did not flinch. Instead, she spoke firmly, her voice steady. "You have no power over me." The spirit recoiled, surprised by her confidence. Calith appeared at her side, his presence immense, calming and commanding. With a subtle gesture, he banished the spirit into the shadows, but his eyes never left hers. "You did well," he said quietly. "You did not rely on me. That is strength." She had never been praised like this for anything she had done on her own, and yet Calith's acknowledgement made her heart swell. The following day, Calith called a council meeting. The hall was tense, the immortal nobles waiting for confrontation. Melis stepped forward, but Calith spoke first. "Change is never easy," Calith said, his voice like a deep river, calm yet powerful. "But the kingdom cannot stand still. Ilara has proven herself wise, strong, and capable. She stands beside me not because I command it, but because she earns it." Ilara's heart pounded. The court whispered, some in awe, some in resentment, but Pelith's words left no room for doubt. Melis's face was pale, his anger restrained but simmering.
"This is, unprecedented," he said.
"Yes," Kylith replied, "and yet necessary. The Night Dominion survives because it adapts, because it embraces courage and wisdom, not fear alone." That evening, under the glow of lanterns and the silver moon, Caliph and Alara walked through the gardens. Silence stretched between them, comfortable and full of meaning. "You have changed everything," Caliph said softly, "not just for yourself, but for this kingdom. You have reminded me of what it means to hope again." Alara felt warmth bloom inside her. "And you have reminded me of what it means to be seen, truly seen." Caliph reached for her hand. She did not hesitate. She did not pull away. "I choose this," she said, her voice steady. "I choose to stand beside you, not because I am safe, but because I want to." Kyla's eyes softened. "And I choose you, not as a king choosing a companion, but as a man who trusts and respects."
"You are not a tribute, not a servant, not a gift. You are my equal."
For the first time in centuries, Caliph felt his heart, once hardened by betrayal, open fully. The curse that had bound him to centuries of grief weakened, not by magic, but by choice, by love and trust, freely given. The Night Dominion shifted with their bond. The shadows seemed softer, the air lighter, the moon above brighter. The council, though still wary, began to accept the change. Mortals and immortals alike noticed that respect and kindness could coexist with power. Alara had become not only Calith's equal, but a symbol. A reminder that courage, choice, and heart could change even the oldest shadows. And as the first hints of dawn touched the obsidian towers, something rare in the Night Dominion, the kingdom knew it was witnessing a new era. Caliph led her to the balcony, looking out over the kingdom he had ruled for centuries.
"This is ours,"
he said quietly, "not because we command it, but because we choose it together." Alara smiled, feeling strength, hope, and love all at once. "Together," she agreed. The stars shimmered, the wind whispered, and the shadows bowed not in fear, but in acknowledgement. The Night Dominion had been changed, not by force, but by trust, courage, and the bond of two hearts that chose each other.